Joining me now, Sergeant CJ Scallon. He is the IACP Vicarious Trauma Fellow. Sergeant, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, let's just get to vicarious trauma. What is that?
Well, vicarious trauma as it pertains to public safety and first responders is nothing more than being exposed to other people's trauma. So it's not necessarily a direct exposure, but through their stories that we find this a lot in crimes against children or individuals that have to investigate violent crimes. Constantly hearing the stories of the victim and being exposed to the after effects of trauma can in turn become trauma or an exposure to trauma. And we've labeled it vicarious trauma.
So why is it so important for police chiefs, leaders of agencies to be able to assess their department's ability to handle vicarious trauma?
Excellent question. We handle the big things with relative ease. In other words, if there's a shooting, if there's a death, we handle those things appropriately. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about vicarious trauma or vicarious traumatization, it's trauma exposure over a long period of time. So it's not one specific incident, but understanding that exposure and prolonged exposure to this kind of trauma or cumulative trauma can have just as damaging effect as one of these big incidents as far as a shooting, line of duty death, or suicide.
And so why is it so important too that leaders, police chiefs, make sure to introduce the awareness to their fellow officers or whatever about vicarious trauma?
So vicarious trauma, unlike the specific incidents that I just discussed, normally you can associate emotional responses to that incident. With vicarious trauma or cumulative trauma as it goes on, there's really not one specific thing. So bringing awareness that it's normal and reducing the stigma, that it's normal to feel this over a period of time after being exposed to this, destigmatizing it and just bringing about awareness is very important.
And so what tools are available for police chiefs, leaders to spread this out among their department?
So the purpose of the fellowship that I was on was to help facilitate on the law enforcement side a toolkit, a virtual toolkit. And what we did was we created and we pulled from existing resources from around the country and some points of the world that address vicarious trauma or vicarious traumatization, whether it be an organization, whether it be a podcast, whether it be literature, studies done or scholastic studies, anything in academia, also practical stuff, emerging practices, anything that kind of relates. And so we vetted these processes and we vetted these resources and put them all together. And they were broken down into 4 categories. And the 4 categories fell under the public safety realm: victim advocacy, EMS, fire, and law enforcement. So it kind of covers it. So it's an online toolkit that you can search within your discipline, but the beauty is you can find all the resources throughout all the disciplines.
Right. All right. Sergeant CJ Scallon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.